Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I'm reviewing the Sony ZV-E1. Now, the reason you're looking at my FX3 and my ZV-E10 is because essentially, in my opinion, the E1 is the offspring of the FX3 and ZV-E10 because you have the sensor of the best-in-class FX3, the body of, well, one of the more affordable and probably one of the better vlogging cameras ever made in the ZV-E10, but then in comes the $2,200 ZV-E1, which, as I just mentioned, has the sensor of the FX3, the body of the ZV-E10, and really performance that you simply cannot get at a $2,200 price point. Now, does that mean it's worth purchasing here in 2024? Well, that is a question I aim to address through the course of this video. So let's start by talking about, again, how long this camera has been on the market and who it's actually aimed at. This launched almost a year ago. This is the review copy that I recently received from Sony. I've spent some time with it and can finally give all of you impressions. And I'll include a link in the description. Again, $2,200 US, body alone. I think it is still a bargain here in 2024 because you simply cannot get this sensor, again, the same one found in the FX3 and A7S III, anywhere else at this price. And the fact that it's lighter and really still well made. Yes, it doesn't have all of the customization of the FX3 and capability, but it does have an AI processing unit which sets it apart from the FX3. Now, a lot of corners, I won't say have been cut, but have been removed. That doesn't really mean anything other than it was an attempt to really make something for another audience with the same baseline or core technology that, well, professionals are using. So even though we have that same 12 megapixel sensor, which means you have 10-bit 422 video, you have 4K 120, of course 4K 60 and 24 down the line, we also have 12 megapixel stills that are best in class when it comes to low light performance. We have a solid touchscreen here on the back with some new gesture controls that Sony has now made standard across their entire platform. But again, it's really about pairing the AI with that FX3 A7S III sensor capability. And that's because that is what makes this camera unique other than its form factor and pricing. So let's talk about what it doesn't have, because I think that's the important thing. Because while you now know it's got some great features that make it seem unbeatable at its price, which I do believe it is missing a lot from, well, the A7S III and especially the FX3. Now, keep in mind, again, $2,200. The FX3, you're looking at nearly $4,000, $3,800, $3,900. And then the A7S III, $3,500. So this is a bargain compared to either of those. But we'll start off with what it doesn't have, and that begins with its SD card slot, because as you can see, we have a single slot. Of course, you're going to need a V90 SD card, much like the Sabrent one that I've covered in the past. This is a great option, affordable, good performance, and that's going to max out the capability of this camera in terms of the highest bit rate, highest quality video it can actually capture. Now, with something like an A7S III or FX3, right there on that side bay, you're not going to have a single slot, but rather two slots. And those slots are also compatible with Compact Flash Express Type A memory cards, which are essentially SSDs inside of your camera. Transfer speeds right around 700 to 800 megs a second. That unlocks so much capability when using this camera, and that applies to the A1 I'm filming on now, the A7S III, and really any of Sony's latest and greatest cameras that are in their pro grade lineup. So of course, a single slot here, but I don't think that's in any way, shape, or form a game breaker. By the way, that same limitation that I'm comparing this to with the FX3 applies to the A7S III. Now, when it comes to ports, you can see there we have a Type-C port, full throughput 3.2. I believe it's a Gen 1. Either way, it's capable of, gigabit speeds. So 4K 30 over, using this over Type-C for webcam purposes works right out of the box. And this camera pretty much set the stage for Sony going forward on live streaming. Of course, you have a mic jack as well as a headphone jack for monitoring and an HDMI out. Now that HDMI out, as you noticed, is a mini HDMI out, not a full size. A lot of people complain about this. I don't think that's a big deal at all. If that's part of the price you pay of getting the smallest and really most powerful full frame video camera ever made, I think it's a very small price to swallow. Now when it comes to controls, that is quite a deviation also from this camera, the FX3 that I shoot on. And I'm going to just, before we get there, give you that side look on the FX3 so you can see what its I/O looks like. And it is markedly different in that, yes, we have a Type-C port. We also have a micro USB port. This was really the end of Sony's proprietary micro port for accessories. Of course, your audio jacks, and then a full-size HDMI port. So, you know, is the overall construction of the FX3 more robust? Does it have mounting points all along the body as well as an XLR handle so that you can bring pro-grade audio right into your video track? Yes, it's all there. Do you have tally lights all over the body, a joystick, much more configuration capable at your fingertips? Absolutely. But the ZV-E1 isn't trying to be a pro-grade video camera. It's trying to be really just the best video camera for regular people or content creators. I don't even like the expression of creators because I feel like mostly people record stuff we don't want to watch, and that's not really creating. And I'm not singling anybody out, but I think eventually, as lucrative as the quote-unquote creator market is, it's going to die out at some point. We're not there yet. The pandemic ushered this push in. But I do think this camera is basically a one-size-fits-all for anyone who wants a best-in-class video camera at the best price that's also, you know, capable of making choices for them. And that's something that also differentiates the ZV-E1 from the FX3 or A7S III, because when you start shooting with this, and I'll throw the lens back on, basically that AI processing unit is going to be a godsend to anyone who really doesn't know what they're doing with this camera, or any camera for that matter. So product showcase is something baked into here that first premiered in the ZV line, like on the E10 and the ZV-1, ZV-1 Mark II, even that little fixed lens one they have, which I didn't cover. Don't know why they made that one, but it did have a wider angle, but I was on my honeymoon when they launched it. At any rate, as you can see in video mode right now, and I'll just show you, I'll get a tighter shot here so you see the menu system, crop in as much as I can. But basically what we're dealing with, I don't want to go clear image zoom on this, is that we're in intelligent auto mode now, where it will make choices for you. Of course, you can change that to any of the other modes, but let's say the majority of so-called content creators or just regular users are going to use this in auto, which I presume they are. They make getting into the choices of making electronic decisions with your imaging very simple. So the first thing on the left side here is selecting your focus point, okay? Makes it really easy to set a target and it will track it. And that's one of the beautiful things about this camera. Its autofocus is better than the FX3 or A7S III, especially because of that AI processing unit. Then we jump into target recognition. And that is where, as you can see, animal, bird, insect, car or train for moving vehicles, airplane, all of these things become selectable. And I think that's just a fabulous component of the ZV-E1 because, folks, it works. And that's the amazing part. So when it comes to tracking, by telling the ZV-E1 what sort of subject it's looking for, it has visual cues that it will recognize and track accordingly and not lose focus on arbitrary things that enter the frame. So that's a feature to love. I can't wait until the FX3 is blessed with that capability. And by that, I mean the FX3 Mark II, because that's never coming to the FX3. There's no AI processing unit on board. Of course, playback you have access to down at the bottom right. You can see we can jump into other settings like color, temperature, scenes, in order to play with essentially the look of your image. The cinema vlog or cine vlog mode on or off, I don't recommend using that. Your microphone control. Now, I haven't talked about the microphone capsule right here at the top, but it's, again, better than pretty much anything else on the market built into a camera like this, anything comparable. and a smart move by Sony. Of course, it's also built to work with external mics, including using its hot shoe. If you have a mic, well, actually, you can even use the XLR handle that I have right here from the FX3, and you can bring pro-grade audio in there, but you can use something like I'm using now, Sony's, well, I won't say brand new streaming mic, but fairly new. It came out at the end of last year. I purchased it as soon as it came out, and, you know, fell in love with it shortly thereafter. I did actually purchase it a second time because I wasn't sure it fit into my workflow, but today is a perfect example of where I'm not using hardwired microphone equipment. I'm not using an XLR mic because I'm recording on my A1. I could, but I don't need to because this mic produces excellent audio quality or audio recordings. But another option, which of course you could easily go with, is one of their pure digital shotguns. And I think this is the best accessory for this camera because in a run and gun capacity, you're going to get audio that certainly doesn't sound like it's coming from an external mic. Or rather, I meant an onboard mic, excuse me. Now, getting back to the microphone, though, that I was just demoing here, get back to the shooting mode and get this back in frame. Granted, that strap is annoyingly in the way, isn't it? But, and I'm just trying to get it out of the way, but you can see there that it is omnidirectional, the mic. And so if we tap the microphone, right now it's in the auto mode, which will detect, you know, intelligently the subject and capture audio accordingly. But we can make it essentially cardioid. I mean, in a sense, now it's only looking forward, the microphone, and we're back to, you know, all directions. So I think that's a really nice feature. Then the next button there, your self-timer. I mean, they're really going through everything. And as I started with your auto, as I mentioned down here, background to focus, this is all about the look of what you're shooting. So really easy. If a person doesn't know how to achieve that bokeh effect, they can easily achieve it now using a slider. And I think a lot of people are going to love that. Darken or brighten the image. So again, you're playing essentially with ISO or ISO. And certainly last but not least, or excuse me, your color temperature. And then last but not least, the actual profile, the creative look that you want to enable. So all about the aesthetic and really transforming what traditionally would be a photographic approach in detail to lay terms that people are going to understand and not wonder about how to use. So that's really cool. The other thing I want to show you in the menu, because, and this is not about being a tutorial or anything like that, because it certainly isn't, is all about that subject recognition that I spoke before about. And hopefully this is clear and visible for everyone, but you just see the depth of controlling the AI here. I mean, there's so much at your fingertips. That is really what makes this such a dynamic video camera at its price. And again, not just for so-called content creators or vloggers. I feel like this is the perfect camera for that mom or dad that has used handy cams in the past, or you grew up with your parents using, you know, video cameras on vacation, and now this is that equivalent. Yes, it's $2,200 without a lens, but this is going to change those memories that you capture infinitely, in my opinion. And I don't think it's unwarranted, considering a lot of people are spending this much on, you know, just mirrorless cameras that are not ideal for their use case scenario. And remember, this takes 12 megapixel stills in the dark because it has that sensor. And guess what? 12 megapixels is more than enough for taking shots here and there. Is it ideal for all forms of photography? Absolutely not, but you get my drift. So certainly more than what your cell phone, your smartphone is going to produce without any hesitation. Remember, the lineage of the A7S line originally was not in video at all. A lot of people think it was. That is a mistake. It was the low light monster for still imaging that segued into video. So moving away from that, I want to talk about stabilization, because that's another area. This beats my FX3 because it has dynamic active stabilization. Now, what that means is that it's actually using the clear image zoom that's been in Sony cameras for a very long time, in conjunction with the active stabilization that came a few generations ago, Sony's best stabilization, digital stabilization ever applied. But there's a 30% crop. But what I can tell you is if you look at video coming out of this camera using that, you will quickly learn that it is best in class. It looks like it's on a gimbal. And yes, that 30% crop is far from what anyone would want, forget ideal, but all of a sudden you have a gimbal when you're not using one. So that is an amazing feature. I cannot wait until the FX3 has something like that. But look, it lives beautifully on a camera like this because it's so small. I mean, not that much bigger than the E10. Don't forget it, but so much more capable. And about not half the size of the FX3, but damn near close to that. So really impressed with this. The breadth of capability and control with this camera is pretty amazing. And while I'm not, you've got the gesture controls to swipe in and out of the touchscreen, which are there, and that's part of what launched with this. I think that's fine. I would have loved it if we could have gotten a new battery type. I'm not complaining. The FZ is still solid, but this is a video camera, and as Sony produces these more and more power-hungry devices, we're getting closer to needing a graduated battery, in my opinion. But overall, build quality here is solid. Does it have the build quality of something like an FX3? Absolutely not. But again, from a capability standpoint, I think the biggest drawback, which I haven't mentioned, is overheating. Now, the reason I saved overheating for this point in the video is that this camera will overheat, this camera will not. I mean, it can, don't get me wrong, it's a piece of electronics. Nothing in life is perfect. But inherently, because this has active cooling, the A7S III does not. That's why I didn't purchase the A7S III. Even though many heralded it as the best camera of its kind, I had a feeling something like this was coming, and I am glad that I waited. The FX3 also got better support, and even though it doesn't have an EVF, I didn't need an EVF. This is a cinema camera. It's not supposed to have an EVF. So obviously the A7S III is there for those of you that are looking for an EVF and care more about that than the repackaged style of the FX3 with all its mounting points, as well as the XLR handle, which a lot of you did not want. I did, so it made sense. And then in addition to that, the most important thing is really the active cooling and the tally lights. I can't tell you, some people think that's a gimmick. It is not. I've worked in entertainment. Tally lights are pretty critical for on-air talent as well as production. And when your only tally light is one of these little things, it's not really a tally light. It's more like an operational light, in my opinion. So having, the tally lights on the record button, on the front record button, just there's more that went into this, in my opinion, than the ZV-E1, and that's clear. And you're paying for it at nearly $4,000. So when this first launched, I will tell you, I was drooling and saying, man, did I make a mistake getting the FX3, because it seems like the ZV-E1 is perfect for YouTubers. And then as soon as I started seeing the initial coverage that was honest about overheating, I knew that it wasn't the right tool for my business, for what I'm doing here with all of you. Now, on the other hand, just like my A1 is not ideal for this. That's why it's in a pinch being used for a review, because it can handle long-form video, but the body is much larger than this, not comparable whatsoever. So just something to be aware of. I personally think the ZV-E1 will make more sense than the majority of cameras on the market for people looking to shoot video alone, because it does that and it does it really well. And unless you live in an incredibly warm climate or you're planning to shoot really long form video, I don't think the overheating is going to be an issue. But if you're making your living shooting video, it is very hard for me to ever recommend the ZV-E1, because I don't think I could make it work even here in a studio environment based on my tests. And that's because after about an hour of video, even with thresholds to the max, it's still going to overheat. So these are issues that you have to be aware of coming into it. That's why I'm making note of them. But between the AI capability, 4K 120, complemented by that AI with the autofocus system, subject recognition, the 4K 30 streaming capability, the Creator app being the best, at least, application Sony's ever produced for their camera line. There's just so much baked into this between hardware and software that you're getting the benefit of people like me buying the FX3 and all the people before me that bought the A7S III, because that technology trickled down to the E1. Again, the love child, even though I don't like using that term, of the FX3, and of course, get them all in the shot. The ZV-E10, got to really sandwich them here, but that is what you're getting. And that to me is a bargain at this price. And I think that anyone who says do not buy the ZV-E1 because of the overheating, that's skewed, because it doesn't overheat that much. And like I said, the majority of users who are regular content creators that are doing short form are going to love this thing. Moms, dads, students that are looking to get great video, best in class, with the benefit of AI, as I'm still trying to center these. If only, there was AI to help me with that. You're going to love this. You're not going to be looking at what comes out next and saying, man, what could I have purchased instead? And for me, while I instantly nearly had buyer's remorse of the FX3, ultimately I had none, because the FX3 really does everything I need, and I'm competent more than enough to dial in what I need to. But again, people like to do this thing where they say, well, when I started on YouTube, well, if this existed when I started on YouTube, life would have been really easy. But it didn't. And in this day and age, it's going to make life very easy for many of you. But inherently, if you need any of the pro features I mentioned, like the dual card slots that support Compact Flash Express Type A, if you care about active cooling, which to me is paramount, if you care about the mounting capability and the far much more robust build quality, and especially the actual XLR handle, there's really not a lot to talk about with the ZV-E1. But if most of those things don't matter and all you care about is video quality, price, and form factor, the E1 is the best camera of its kind ever made. And that's because it's not going to constantly overheat on you. It's not going to miss. It handles focus breathing beautifully. And, if I had one wish with this, it's probably that, that the handle would probably be a little bit larger, but I wouldn't want to make this camera any bigger. In fact, this to me is the perfect camera for going on vacation to ensure you get amazing video and stills in a pinch. One package to do it all. It's certainly not a hybrid, but it can be. And, you've got that button right there for defocusing background, the whole product showcase identity. So I feel like it's a very finished product for who Sony is targeting. The improved touchscreen and overall menu system is a welcomed addition. I personally am very curious what Sony will be doing with the ZV-E1 Mark II, because, well, then this camera is going to become less expensive and even more of a bargain, which then I might pick one up as a B cam, because that's what I see this as. A B or a C cam, this is perfect for that application. You're going to have, as I've mentioned over and over again, phenomenal video quality. It's going to match your A cam if it's something like an FX3. And personally, initially I thought, once I had done enough research on this camera before it came into the studio, that I'd be happier with something like an FX30 because of the active cooling and not always needing the dynamic range that full frame brings to the table, because I do think it gets a little more credit than it should in the realm of photography. People think, it's full frame or bust. I understand why all too well. But I think after using this through my reviewer window, I would go with the E1, because I wouldn't worry about a B or C cam overheating, at least in my application, the way obviously an A cam cannot. And again, in the right environments, I should say, I just think the ZV-E1 blows away the FX30, not to the point that the FX30 is a slouch. I still think the FX30 at its price is also impossible to beat here in 2024. And if I end up purchasing one, I'll probably revisit it for that reason. But that's kind of where I'm at. I'm trying to decide between this, and an FX30, and really it'll matter most of all where this goes. I mean, the ZV-E1 has the potential really to be best in class. If Sony had thrown any kind of active cooling on this, then it probably would have been something that I would have been willing to get rid of my FX30 for, 3, excuse me, I made it a 30, because while it's great to have redundancy in the card slots, I don't need it. A lot of you do who are doing paid assignment. I totally get it. Do I need all the mounting points? No. Do I need the XLR handle? Well, I could add it to this, right? Do I need What else can I think of? The extra finite control on all the tally lights, I'd like to have that, but I'd rather have the brains that Sony has incorporated, because that is something that's an intangible that, I can dial in everything here, even if it's more cumbersome than on the FX3. What I can't dial in is the AI capability. And I didn't even talk about the auto framing function in this. It's there. I think it's a gimmick. I remember it almost, I think it's 20 years ago. Logitech had a webcam that would follow you around and do auto framing. And I feel like that's what Sony put into this. And it's cool. So basically you have it mounted, you walk around, it'll follow you. It'll, based on what you tell it to do, essentially, it can go tight and just do, a 60 minutes crop on your head, a head chop off. Or, of course, it'll do your waist up, or, of course, a full shot. That's very cool stuff, but probably the least impressive of all the elements the ZV-E1, yes, I almost got confused there, the ZV-E1 brings to the table. But that pretty much rounds things out. Again, at $2,200, the FX3 and the ZV-E10 have given you, really, in my opinion, the best video camera ever made for regular human beings. And the fact that pros like it isn't surprising. It's really affordable, as I keep saying over and over again. But inherently, if you're, trying to shoot something and you need certain things that the FX3 has or the A7S III has, and this simply doesn't have it, well, it's obvious you need what you need. I think the comparison of this to the A7S III is the more intriguing one, because, it does have an EVF. Here, to me, it's very clear if you need what the FX3 has, you can't get the E1. And it's amazing how many people have said they dumped the FX3 for the E1. To me, all you're revealing there is that you bought more camera than you needed, right? And I'm not being critical of those people. At the time, there really was no better option. But I just can't see selling the FX3, recouping that little bit of money, and being happy with what I've given up to get what's in the E1, which is really just that AI unit. That is the only thing. Yes, the lighter weight for me, especially post-op with the surgery I had, everything is heavy these days. So I love the weight difference, but I don't walk around shooting with the FX3. If I did, that would be a different story. But that wraps things up. This is a great camera. If you need to shoot 10-bit, 422, you've got it. You've got the full breadth and capability of that low light sensor that's in the FX3 and A7S III. And the things they've pulled away are only going to matter to someone if they're doing paid assignments, in my opinion. And even then, you'll know what you can get away with something like the ZV-E1. But that rounds things out. This is a great camera. I can easily recommend it, again, as long as you understand its limitations, but also appreciate all of its strengths. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them at that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe, and please stay safe. Later.